Alright, so for today's video, we're going to be going over the scientific paper, just briefly going over the different parts of a scientific paper, what they're supposed to include, and sort of what they look like. So for the first thing that I'm going to do is an easy way to see an example of a scientific paper, especially to a journal that you're going to be publishing to, is to just search up the JDSO, which is the Journal of Double Star Observation. So when you click on that, it'll just take you to the home page, and you can go through and you can click on any link here. These are just articles that have been published. Anyone that has the word double star or quadruple star or astrometric measurement, any of those are going to be any double star measurement style articles. So that's what I would do. I've clicked on a couple up here so that we can take a look at them as we go through. But when you pull them up, it's just going to pull them up just like an article. It's going to look exactly how it would in any other journal. And these are a great place to get started, just to look at what other people have done and kind of what's supposed to go in there, and just give you an example of some places you can look. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about, and really the first part of these scientific papers, is you have your title, but then the first piece of text really that you're going to be putting in here is the abstract. Right, so the purpose of the abstract is actually to briefly describe the issue that's involved, give a very, very brief introduction if necessary, to talk about the end results, talk about the conclusion that's made, but to do so very, very briefly. The idea is less than 300 words. In a lot of scenarios, you want to try for even less than that. So in this paper specifically, they introduced their star, they said how it was imaged, they said here why they're imaging it, why it matters. When they talk here, they say, oh, these share proper motion, but the other ones don't, so they're likely unphysically related. So in this paragraph here, they've managed to introduce it. They've managed to state why it was important to study it. They've stated what their studies concluded, and you're done. So an abstract's very brief. It's just a summary of your paper, basically. And so then after the abstract, we come to the introduction. So in the introduction, you're basically going to introduce what's going on. And you're going to want to start broad to narrow. So the idea is you start out broad, we're measuring double stars. It's important so that we can know if they're physical or not, which will tell us important information about their properties. And as you go in, you'll start to hone in on the specific system, why that specific system was chosen for observations. And it'll just be kind of stating eventually the purpose of your research. So it starts out broad. This is the general area I'm in. And it goes all the way into, this is my specific problem I want to study, this is why, and this is what it's all about. And also in your introduction, you're going to have a figure here, right here, that shows the picture of the stars and where they're located. And just to see in every other one, you can see the same thing. Usually it's called a finder chart. It's not necessarily labeled as a finder chart, but that's what it is. It's an image that shows where the stars are located with arrows pointing to them or letters next to them, showing their general area in the night sky. So that if someone else wanted to study it, they could. So that's an essential piece of information that'll go in the introduction. And while we're on figures real quick, before I jump down to methods, I want to talk about something important, which is the figure legend here. So the idea with the figure legend is someone should be able to read this legend or this description down here and be able to understand everything about the figure without ever needing to read anything in the text. So when I look here, it says find a chart of this star, these two components of the system, tells me the plate scale. Okay, so it's just saying this is where it's found. We scroll down to another image that says table 1, measurements of separation and position angle for this star. So each of these descriptions that's down below these figures should provide an accurate description of the figure that's complete without needing to go to the text. So now that we've talked about figures and introduction, we're going to get into the methods. So the methods is the bare bones, kind of painstaking process of explaining the process of the research. So usually for astronomy, that starts out with explaining where the observatory is located. It includes the specs of the camera and the imaging system and the plate scale and all of that information. And then it talks about the specific changes that are made between imaging. So the exposure time, the filters, any calibration that was used, any software that's used to measure. So the purpose of the methods is really to describe how the experiment was performed, how the research was performed. So in astronomy, that really involves the telescope and its specs and the imaging system and its specs completely. One thing I want to point out is that each of these sections has its information, but it doesn't include any information from the other section. So notice the introduction doesn't mention anything about the methods. My methods doesn't introduce anything new. All it is my methods for imaging. And as we go on to results, results will only have the results. It won't have any information about the methods or the introduction. It'll just say, these are our results. This is what we found. Usually it includes a table, and it's very short and sweet normally. It has very little to actually contain in it. So most results can be even summarized in 3 sentences when we're talking these double star papers. And so after you've done results, an important thing to note in results is that you don't describe the significance of the results. Notice here we said, here's our number of observations, this is what we calculated, but we don't interpret what any of this means in the results. Otherwise, we're kind of going out of order. It's like eating ice cream before you have a hamburger and then just not drinking the entire time. It doesn't make sense. The order is all wrong. So everything about scientific writing has an order. Everything needs to be in its spot, or else it kind of seems out of place. So results are just results, and then in what the explaining of the results happens in the discussion. So the purpose of the discussion is just to summarize what the purpose of the project was, what the results of the project were, and then the significance of those results specifically. So just listing the results has no purpose, but explaining why they were significant because of what they are, that's important for the discussion. So the discussion is sort of the why this mattered and what it means for future. And a lot of things that will appear in this discussion will be tables, will be charts, will be measurements that help, explain the significance of the findings in the research. And then at the very end, you'll have your acknowledgments. So you'll be able to acknowledge the different programs, different systems, different groups that helped to make the research possible. And then also the references for the paper itself. So references describing things like the telescope specs, anything describing similar research that's been performed or research that has been used to base our study methods off of. So that's a quick summary of the paper. It's pretty short and sweet. In another video, we'll actually break down into each section, how to write each section more in depth, what each section needs. We'll also go into how to write it, science of scientific writing paper that'll help a little bit more, but we'll get into that next time. Thanks for watching.